and welcome to episode 85 of the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast. I'm your host, Annabelle Bateman, and today I'm talking with Dr. Krista Coombs all about functional medicine. What is functional medicine? What is it in relation to integrative medicine or holistic medicine? All these different terms you may have heard. We're diving into kind of what they are, and more importantly, how can you use functional medicine principles and practitioners to help you get the most out of your thyroid health. So that's what we're talking about all today. Dr. Krista Coombs is actually a Chinese medicine practitioner. She's been practicing Chinese medicine for the last couple of decades. And about 9 or 10 years ago, she was qualified as a functional medicine practitioner, which is a whole lot of extra study, and has been able to combine those two modalities in the way that she looks after her patients. So she's got a really interesting perspective, and like so many professionals in this space, has Hashimoto's and talks a lot in this episode about her own experiences, both in just regaining energy and losing weight and tackling mindset all around Hashimoto's and feeling great. So I hope you really enjoy this episode. You're going to want to stick around to the end for a couple of reasons. One, because at the end of the episode, Dr. Coombs is giving away an incredibly generous gift to those of you listening today, so you want to check that out. And number two is don't forget to stick around to the very end for the KISS thyroid coaching segment, where I help you to have a tangible takeaway that you can apply to your life, so that the knowledge that you've accumulated in the next hour or so, you can take some steps to implement it and apply it to your life. So welcome, Dr. Krista Coombs, to the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast, all the way from Canada. We were just saying that we're on the polar opposite ends of the world. You're in the snow and I'm in the very hot sun today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. It's going to be awesome, Annabelle.
Yeah, I know. We had a chat last week just to kind of nut out, what we're going to really talk about. And we could have just hit record on that conversation and that would have been good too. So I have no doubt, we're going to cover some really great territory today all around. We hear the term functional medicine doctor, integrative health, like all these different terms. And that's what we're really going to dive into with you today. So looking forward to getting into that. But before we do, do you mind sharing your thyroid story with us a little bit and how that kind of connects in with the work that, that you do, that sort of personal professional collide, which often seems to happen for those of us in this space?
Well, I think it happens for most of us in this space.
Seems to.
You start niching out when you've gotten sick yourself and you start figuring out how to handle it. So I've been practicing Chinese medicine for a very long time, a couple of decades. But after, it must have been about 12 years of that, I was spiraling into a health decline. And, it's just when I was around 42. And, perimenopause, all the things, right, that start happening, all the changes and stressors that happen and compound over time. And I found that I just couldn't live up to my standards of healthcare anymore. And I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. So I had to really kind of push my physician at the time to evaluate me for Hashimoto's. He didn't think I had it. I was pretty sure I did. You know how the story goes. And but because I'm in the field, I guess it was a little easier for me to navigate that. I was a little more assertive. I got tested. I knew I was right. And so I found out I had Hashimoto's, and no doubt that was brewing for many, many years, probably a good 10 years prior. I mean, you're familiar with how that develops.
Yeah.
And the research is really clear. It can take 7 to 10 years to be getting, flares of attacks against your thyroid and other tissues actually, before the results on a blood work show up that you need external support from thyroid hormone medication. But in all that time, your thyroid's being destroyed. So this was happening to me. I was having really bad symptoms. I could barely get up out of bed in the morning. I just started this clinic. It was only 6 months old. And I could barely put a sentence together. And crying all the time, just gaining a lot of weight, really depressive, cold, losing some hair, and real deep fatigue. And I thought I was going to end up in a wheelchair. And so the day I found out that I had Hashimoto's, it was really early in the morning. I remember it was like May 2nd in 2016. And I just sat in my truck and I just had a little cry because you got to feel it. You got to acknowledge it. And then I just said, okay, next, what am I going to do? And that week, that same day, I changed everything about my diet because, of course, I was already in the know. I knew a lot of things, and I put it into place. And within a week, I was a different person. And then I was like, oh my God, I have to learn this stuff. And that's where my love affair, if you want to call it that, with functional medicine actually began. I've always loved Western medicine, but I didn't like how it was delivered to the masses. And I certainly didn't like how I felt in that system, which is why I got into what's considered, the alternatives, or the complementary health arts. Traditional Chinese medicine was my choice. And so I just started to devour every book I could find on the topic. I devoured every course I could get my hands on. I studied everything so far from Dr Karazian, who's like, specimen,
I know.
like, you're right.
My husband keeps saying, you've got to get him on for like your
Oh,
100th episode. And I'm like, I haven't been brave enough to ask it. But,
he'd
yeah,
talk you in circles. He's incredible. That
I
man,
know. He's
I met
incredible.
him at a
Yeah.
conference, an autoimmunity conference in, I think it was 2017 or 18. One of the nicest people I've ever met. And I was crying. I was just so happy to meet him. Anyways, I've devoured everything he's put out, all his
Yeah.
courses. I'm in his mentorship program. It's just, he's a
Mm-hmm.
gift
Oh,
to
yeah, that'd be
the
amazing.
universe.
Yeah.
But Dr. Terry Walls, I met her too. She's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I study, I read everything from, Dr. Vajani, all the greats, Isabella Wentz, everybody on our team, and I
Yep.
became certified, which took a little bit of effort, I gotta say. I became certified with the Institute for Functional Medicine. So I did all their program, which is considered the gold
Mm-hmm.
standard for functional medicine training. And
Mm.
I certified with that. And, the rest is history. I learned how to manage Hashimoto's quite a bit, but I was still declining even with all that
Mm.
knowledge. So, knowledge is only as good as what you apply, right? And
Oh, yeah.
right, and
I wish we could just like know it and it just happened.
right, wouldn't
That
that
would
be
be
lovely?
nice,
You just
wouldn't it?
touch a book, you kind of know, and boom. But
Yeah.
no, you got to practice it,
Mm-hmm.
and you got to come to terms with that in yourself. But anyways, it took me quite a few years and trial and error with other people, but I became integrative. So I've combined Chinese medicine and all my skill set, couple of decades of experience with that, and married that with all the complexities of functional medicine. And I've got this really cool balance of lifestyle medicine, is kind of how I call it. And
Mm.
it's a beautiful marriage. There's a few, fights in there sometimes, but generally speaking, it works really well. And
Yeah. So you're doing both. You've been
I
able to
have, yeah.
integrate the traditional China. Yeah, right. So how does that, what does that look like,
Mm.
or how's that been to kind of mix those two together?
It's it's a bit of challenging in terms of how to teach my patients what it all means. And so
Mm-hmm.
they have an expectation sometimes that I'm just, acupuncture, where, Chinese medicine is really way more than acupuncture. Acupuncture is a tool within
Mm-hmm.
that medical discipline. But over time, I've been able to create programs and stuff that marry the two together, and I'm teaching people through Facebook courses, programs, groups, whatever. And it's becoming a little easier, and it's certainly easier because so much is on social media now, and people are becoming more aware of what functional medicine is. I would say in the
Mm-hmm.
US, functional medicine is a lot more commonplace. There's a lot more practitioners there than we have in Australia or in Canada. But it's a growing
Yeah.
field. I know for my town of 100,000 people, to my knowledge, I'm the only functional medicine practitioner here, certainly the only integrative.
Mm.
And, that's kind of unfortunate because if I advertise much, I'm probably going to be too busy. But with one-on-one care, which is why I do group care, it's sort of,
Mm.
you can teach once and give to the masses, and actually influence more people, probably more dramatically. But anyways, yeah, it's
Mm.
been challenging the first number of years, but now it's becoming a lot easier to marry them. I think because I just live it. Like
Yeah. Well, you've integrated
yeah,
it
I've
into your
integrated
own
into
health
myself.
and
Well,
life.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Mm.
now I can't not talk about it. It just is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now it's easier.
Mm. So is that what you, I'm going to ask you in a minute. Or actually, I might ask you now. about what really is functional medicine, but then you then said you've become an integrative practitioner. So maybe can you just sort of describe, because I hear the terms, or maybe I've even used the terms interchangeably. Maybe they're not. And I think they can mean different things in different places around the world. I think you're right. We don't really have the whole functional medicine practitioner here isn't really not really a thing. We kind of look for a holistic doctor or an integrate. Like I sort of say, look for any of those words: holistic, integrative, functional. But can you just explain what is functional medicine, and then is there a difference with integrative medicine?
Sure. I think it's used interchangeably, and I think that the reason that we do that is because there's really no structure, no formal structure. There was no licensing for functional medicine. There's certification, and you'll find like a lot of MDs, medical doctors, will say they're integrative because they're integrating what they're doing with functional medicine, or they're integrating it with some of the alternatives, like Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine or even naturopathy. I think it depends who you're talking to. I call it integrative because for, I think, the majority of people in my kind of world, they seem to understand that more than if I say functional medicine, until they understand what functional medicine is. And I also would like them to know that I'm marrying multiple disciplines so that we can get a more holistic kind of approach to the body. But functional medicine, in a nutshell, would be taking all this beautiful science that we have, that we think are facts, and we're taking that and we're applying it to the body in terms of systems. So it's a systems approach to wellness. Instead of saying, I'm just I'm sending you to a heart doctor, a cardiologist, because they're going to work on your heart. We're saying, well, the heart's related to the gut. It's related to the mouth. It's related to the kidneys. And it's related to the detox organs like the liver and the gallbladder. It's related to everything. All the systems interact. Your heart is not separate from the rest of you. Just as much as your gut is not separate from the rest of you, and so on. So functional medicine, just like Chinese medicine, is looking for patterns within those systems, seeing where there is a lot of dysfunction or symptoms, which is basically what we're calling disease. So we have symptoms that are proving that your body's not in alignment with the environment you keep putting it into. And then we say, well, where in that big web of really cool functions and interrelationships is there a lot of congestion? And then we pull on that. And when you pull on that and you start healing that area, everything else starts to benefit. So when people say functional medicine is root cause medicine, kinda, I think that's gotten overdone because, some of the root causes of health, which might be, when you're in the womb, can't be corrected today. Some of the things in an injury or whatever can't be corrected today. But we can look at what the dysfunction is happening now, all the symptoms, and we can say, where can we pull and make and support and get the biggest, benefit on the rest of the body. And that, I think, is functional medicine at its finest. That's integrative even medicine at its finest, where you're finding ways for that particular individual to rebalance the systems as best as you can with the body that they got, the genetics that they have, and the environments that they have access to. And by environment, I mean all the inputs, right? You have an internal environment with your thoughts, which are things. They create change and chemical changes in the body, and repetitive thoughts create repetitive change in the body and well trodden paths. And then, of course, you got people you socialize with the most. You have the weather, the seasonal impacts. You have toxic load impacts, and you have food impacts. And the one you have and water, and the ones you have the most control over are the food and the water. So that's basically what I'm always training people to look at, is look at those fundamental things. Where can you make the most change to influence most organs and those systems so they communicate better? That's functional medicine.
Yeah.
That's a pretty long definition. but
that's really helpful because, I mean, I think intuitively, probably most people, if you've been listening in this sort of space for a while, you'd have got a feel for that. But I think it's still helpful to have it unpacked that little bit, because we do hear different terms bandied around.
But I think you need to talk, if you're exploring working with somebody, really listen to how they describe what they do, because maybe it won't fit
Mm.
your idea of what the medicine should be for you. And I tell patients all the time, I might not be everybody's cup of tea, but I might be somebody's cup of coffee. And you gotta kind of, be the person. You gotta resonate with whoever is going to be working with you. And if their definition of healthcare is not what your definition of healthcare, what you want it to be, you keep looking.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You want to have a long-term
yeah,
relationship. Well, I think it's helpful from a thyroid. I mean, we live with thyroid health issues forever.
yep,
So not that we need to stay with the same practitioner forever because we all kind of, move and change, but we need to have at least a practitioner, I think, that we're working with long term,
yep. I think so. I think it's nice to have a
that
health
gets to
team.
know us too.
It's nice to have a
Yeah.
health team, but you definitely need somebody who's your guide on the side. I always say it's like, have you heard of Joe Polish? He's a famous
No.
he's a famous marketer. I love the man. And he says,
Okay.
I want to be the guy. I don't want to be the sage on the stage. I want to be the guide on the side. So I like that. I want to be the guide on the side
Mm.
that says, yeah, you're going in the right direction, I think, based on this literature or this, what I learned yesterday, and it
Yeah.
changes all the time. And it's
Hmm.
nice to have that accountability and also that guidance, that is educated guidance, and, basically another cheerleader that really gets it.
Mm.
And that's why probably why Hashimoto's patients tend to resonate with me, because I have it. I know the
Yeah.
challenges. I know what it's like, and I'm aging with it. And I came to it. I came to understand it a little later in life, when a lot of damage had already happened. You came. I
Mm.
think you got it a little earlier,
Yeah.
and you've
Yeah.
been able
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
manage it pretty good, actually, in that time frame. Whereas I came to it a little later, and I might have had more damage, really, than maybe what you did.
Well, yeah, it's hard to know. No, I think for
Yeah.
me, I was diagnosed younger, like 22, but my thyroid was fried already
Yeah.
by then. I think for me, it kicked in at puberty. It was sort of around that. And so I think I had a good 10 years of destruction before it was picked up.
Yeah. If only we could reach more
So, I
people.
mean, I
Hey,
think, yeah,
the
I
young
know.
people.
I know. And that's why Let's Talk Thyroid podcast exists, really, is let's spread the word because, yeah, I don't, yeah, the more people that can pick up
Yeah.
early, a thyroid problem and start taking this sort of fundamental,
Yeah.
functional, diet, lifestyle,
Yep.
approach, it's just going to help all the other layers. So I think, yeah, it probably doesn't. Yeah, I mean, they're probably the difference between when you were diagnosed and when I was in period of time is that there's just a lot more information when you
You're
were like,
right.
and I think when I was 22, that was
Yep.
1996. There was the internet didn't
I
even
know,
exist,
right?
so, so it makes me feel really old. I think, no, I'm only 48. It's okay. But, I look back and I think, yeah, there wasn't that sort of depth of information. Like I remember sending away for cassettes to listen to, and I had a really good doctor, but there just wasn't the information. And anyway, it's happened
But
over time.
even
So
today, with this mass information on the internet, people are still struggling. They get bogged
yeah.
down. I mean, I love seekers. So anybody who's going to Dr. Google, great. We have doctors who don't think that's a good idea. I think it's wonderful, because it means you're seeking.
Mm,
It means you're trying to learn. But I think what happens is you need guidance on how to apply that personally to your unique
hmm.
body, and that's challenging for people if they don't have a basis in understanding this, basic physiology. And that's where you come to geeks
Mm,
like me to kind of, show you which path to take,
yeah.
that might work for you the best. But, a lot of these young people, even if they're getting diagnosed, well, they're getting diagnosed maybe with hypothyroidism, but not necessarily Hashimoto's, because docs don't, in general, in the Western area, they don't really believe that you can do much. I don't know why. I don't know why they don't read the new research. But anyways, they don't seem to think that they can do anything more than just watch your thyroid decline over time, and you just need more and more meds. And it's so sad. They rarely will test for Hashimoto's. And even I have patients that come to me, they've been diagnosed with Hashimoto's, and still their docs don't tell them what to do. They don't give them any guidance. They don't, nothing, not even a book.
Well, they don't believe there's anything you can do for the autoimmune
But
component.
yet there's so much. And you can slow down
I know.
you can slow down what's called epitope spreading. You can slow down, the development of more autoimmune diseases with lifestyle. and choices and mindset shifts. And that's what you and I both teach and have embodied to slow things down for ourselves and make our lives better. But I see a lot of people, they don't want to change until they get really sick and their life is being really interrupted. I get that. It's human nature. We just sort of want to keep coasting and doing until we fall apart. But boy, if we could reach these young people like at puberty and go, if these symptoms happen, hey, parents, listen, here's what you do. Teach these kids how to do this so that they don't have to suffer. They don't have to have
Yeah.
depression. They don't have to have huge weight gain. They don't have to have the self-esteem hits. They don't have to have, the whirlwind of all these debilitating type symptoms or the development of other, cohabitating types of autoimmune diseases like MS and celiac and rheumatoid arthritis and all the different things, diabetes and so on, PCOS. They go hand in hand with Hashimoto's because it's, the number one autoimmune disease on the planet. If we could reach those people, and that'd be amazing. But we're trying.
Yeah, we're trying. And I think in the end, I mean, that's people like I think about my own kids. I've got 3 teenage boys. They're sort of 19, almost 17, 15. And, I don't know, boys are interesting. It is, I guess I think that's part of my responsibility is to teach them and make them aware. And I think right at the ages they're at now, they don't necessarily want to do what I want to do. Hand them supplements, some will swallow them, some won't, and I'm like, well, you've got to look after yourself as best you can because
They don't know that.
you will have a genetic, there is a genetic component. Hello. And so, I don't want to see you, develop an autoimmune disease. And look, by no means are they, really following a super healthy kind of diet. They've got a fairly normal, fairly healthy because I cook all the food from scratch and, but I guess it's those little seeds
That's
and,
it. That's all you can
some
do.
will latch on and that is. And so then when they are a bit, a bit older and if things do start to fall apart, then I think that, well, whether they come to me or not, I don't know, but they certainly be a little bit more aware. And maybe it is that it's a multi-generational
I
approach
think so.
because people like you and I, like the more people that we're reaching in the work that we do, the more influence that will have on the younger generations as they're coming
Absolutely.
through and older. Like I've had guests on the show that, well, and probably this is my experience too, because my mum was only diagnosed a couple of years ago with Hashimoto's. And so I think there's education going both directions generationally. Okay. And I've
I
talked to a
agree with
few
you.
guests who have said now, like my mum has suffered forever. A doctor never said she could do anything about it. And then now, like, in their, 60s, 70s and 80s, they're trying to making some changes and at least feeling better at the end,
Absolutely, they
at that,
can.
in their older
Yeah,
years.
you can
So
change at any stage. I don't think
mm,
there's a really big tipping point. I think you can always make a change and have
yeah.
a positive influence on your systems. I mean, we live in a pretty toxic environment worldwide. It's not surprising we have this big uptick in autoimmunity. I mean, there's over 100 autoimmune
Mm,
diseases described. Hashimoto's being, at the top of the list there next to rheumatoid arthritis. Seems like everybody's getting it, developing
yeah,
dysfunction in their
yeah.
systems. But
Mm,
getting back to the grassroots of healthcare is the name of the game. I mean, you live this. You got the KISS principle. Mine is the
yeah.
easy way, EASY, and it's basically the same fundamentally, and it's about finding a
Mm,
way to teach people how to get back to the basics, the foundations, and stop complicating everything. Get back to the basics, doing the stuff. I mean, how many times do I have a patient sit in front of me and I'm just assuming they drank their water and they don't? They don't. They
yeah.
don't drink water. And yet, here they are on these massive meds that maybe if they drank water, they wouldn't need so many meds. And just teaching them to get back to the basics, putting the power back in their hands. That's what we're here
Mm,
for. That's why we're shouting from the rooftops.
yeah. And is that where you see functional medicine impacting on the practice of
Mm.
medicine? Like, do you see that happening? Um, yeah. Do you see that?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a shift even within the functional medicine community, which is getting growing and growing and growing. For a while there, originally it was pretty basic. Looking at root causes, root cause analysis, and trying to correct things. But it became so complicated it became so overcomplicated. And I'm really smack in it. I'm right in with all these people doing all these massive courses, and it's very complicated stuff and fun for geeks like me. But
Mm.
it's not really applicable.
It is, no, it is
It is,
complicated.
and
I
and you
agree.
can't,
Yeah.
you're not going to sit down and teach somebody about the mitochondria and how all, the Krebs cycle works and go into all those micro details that I love, but that aren't going to move the needle for that particular patient who's suffering right in front of me and crying on
Mm.
on the table. So um, I had to really come to terms with trying to simplify that, uh,
Mm.
to make it applicable to the people. And functional medicine, I mean, historically is pretty, yeah, elitist and expensive and very, very, very test based. I mean, there's some practitioners you'll go
Mm.
to, and in order to even just start working with them, you have to do this battery of functional tests that cost you thousands of dollars just to see them. I don't think that applies to everybody, especially if they haven't done the basics. If they haven't done the basics, my God, of course you're going to find a lot of things in these tests where patients
Mm.
know they're sick. I don't know if they need to have details on a $500-$600 or $1,000 functional test to prove it to them. So getting the foundational stuff in line, and then whatever's left over, maybe that do a functional test or two and finesse it with a well trained practitioner. Great, that's a great investment. But the first investment needs to be the basics. If you nail those, you rock those, probably there's not much left over. And you're
Mm.
going to decline at a slower rate. You're going to have a great quality of life. You're going to probably start living your best life and achieving more goals, and extending your health span, which is something I talk about all the time. That's the goal. I mean, we're all going to die at some point, but we want to have a really long health span, not just live a long
Mm.
time and suffer.
Mm. Yeah.
I want to do
Yeah.
stuff, and I want to do it with more ease. I'm sick of
Mm.
having pain. I'm sick of being overweight, or sick of saying I
Yeah. Not being able to, yeah,
or saying that
anything. Yeah.
I it's my Hashimoto's. It's just a collection of symptoms. I'm
Mm.
tired of defining myself as a Hashimoto's patient. I have that collection of symptoms. We've called it Hashimoto's. Do I suffer as much from it anymore? No way. Why? Because I dial in the basics, and
Mm.
and I'm slowing the aging process and slowing my downhill spiral. There isn't a spiral anymore, and so I'm trying to teach people how to do that, which is really basically what you're doing as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's why we had such synergy
Yeah.
because yeah, it's like yeah, we're on the same page, and I think that's great. But not but when we're talking about, you just said before, we're talking about functional medicine. You go to see a functional medicine practitioner, really in any country, and it is expensive. And I mean, when I think about all the extra, training and courses, none of them are cheap.
Mm.
So like obviously as a patient, you're paying for a lot of education, time, effort, all of that, but it does put it out of the reach of some people. And I know people that listen to this podcast are all around the world, all different kind of medical systems. And so some have insurance, some don't, some have an element of, government funded healthcare, some don't. But in the end, I think we all end up paying out of our own
Yeah.
pocket, for good healthcare or, extra good healthcare. So how as a functional medicine practitioner, do you kind of balance you know that up? Like how do you sort of approach that cost, making things affordable, but obviously you still make your living, and reflect, your prices still have to reflect the expertise that you have. How does that work from your perspective?
Yeah, so I'm learning to train people who come into my orbit, uh, what their options are. It's never going to be super cheap to see a functional medicine practitioner one on one, because the amount of time we spend with people one on one is very high. In order to get to know them, to be their cheerleader, to for them to have access to us through private messaging, all the things that I do through my app, that's a privilege, right? And you're working with somebody who is, they've chosen a very difficult way to practice medicine. It's not cookie cutter. It's very personalized. And to get personalized care, I
Mm.
mean, in anything, it's going to cost you a little bit of money. But what I'm trying to teach people in my orbit is that if you start with the group stuff first, which almost anybody can afford, maybe not everybody, and that's where I think books are really helpful, because that's kind of low hanging fruit. They can at least study from whoever they want to follow, and your book is great
Mm-hmm.
for that. Um, let's talk thyroid. It's excellent. But then the next level, I think, would be group, which is what I'm exploring, and that's why I'm building out this group program called The Easy Way with Dr. K. Because if they go in that group and they start to thrive and they master the four easy foundational pillars, EASY, which we can talk about, and how that looks like KISS for your program, when they navigate that, like almost all their symptoms start to go away. We've got people with rheumatoid arthritis, almost all their pain's gone within a couple of weeks. And they've been suffering for
Mm.
years. And just because they're applying the foundational stuff and they're getting and coaching and peer coaching even, and coaching from a professional like myself every day. And so that's a low hanging cost option, low hanging fruit cost option. And then whatever is left over at the end of the day, after they've mastered that stuff, maybe there's some extra things that need a little finessing. They might have some genetic anomalies that, make them a little more at risk for detox issues, or they've got too many sensitivities to molds, and there's ways to support the body so it can handle that, or, we're trying to help them detox, or we're trying to help them, rebuild certain tissue. Absolutely. Then, you can spend a little extra money working with a person like myself, and it's worth it then. It's
Mm-hmm.
really worth it. If they're spending, big bucks working with me, and some people still think my one-on-one is a little expensive because they're not used to what it really costs from a lot of people. But then they're not used to spending money out of pocket for healthcare. But this is real healthcare. This is not sick care. This is healthcare. And it's teaching, it's education. When they start spending that money, usually what happens is I'm working with them with the basics. They're spending big money for
Mm.
me to teach them to drink water and to work on their mindset and to work on activity and work on, doing a curated, more adapted type of, immune elimination diet and how to personalize that. You can do that in a group with good care, with good guidance, and it's cheaper. But paying me big bucks just to teach them the basics, I never get to finesse anything because they're like, well, I got no money left to be able to do the finessing. Whereas they do the group, it's a lower cost entry. They get huge scale and non-scale wins, and they get it in a community environment with people who are doing the same stuff they are, been through the same stuff they've been going through, and they
Mm.
understand each other, unlike some family members and friends in the community, and docs actually in the community that don't support these people. So they get that camaraderie, then they
Mm.
can work one-on-one. So in the end, it
Yeah.
costs, I think I'm trying to make it more affordable, getting education to the masses at a more affordable price, but with really good content that they can actually use to move the needle. And
Mm.
then whoever they work with them for the finessing, it's an easier job for them, way easier, because these people are
Yeah.
more knowledgeable. They're their own doctor basically, and they know more than their practitioners most of the time. And
Yeah.
they can guide care. They're the hub of the wheel. They can guide care, and they've got their power back.
Mm.
It's all about getting the power back. I love my job.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we do. I think it takes a long time as a patient to take that power back
Yeah.
and to be assertive and even just proactive. And I think that's what a lot of what you're saying is when we as patients take
Hmm.
responsibility. I think that's a big P, responsibility for our health, for what we put in and on and around our bodies, what we, the way we think about our body and our health and our health conditions, all of those things. We have to take responsibility for that. And that's not easy because it is easier to give that to a health
Well,
practitioner
we're
and say, just
trained to give
tell
it
me
to a
what I
health
need to do.
practitioner. The system across the world, the system
Mm-hmm.
is developed to make you dependent. We are, if
Mm.
something you get a headache, you go to your doctor to get a pill, or you go to the pharmacy and you get a pill. We don't have a pill deficiency. We have a lifestyle in deficiency, and
Yeah.
we have we've been trained to not take responsibility for our body. It's almost like we need somebody to tell us what to do. It's like we have ex-parents when we're adults that are telling us what to do, and they're the government and the medical system, etc. And until people start hearing about that, they don't even realize they've given away their power. I didn't know I'd given away my power all my most of my adult life, And then when I realized it, I was kind of angry. And then I
Mm.
came to terms with it and I said, next. I'm just going to own it,
Yeah.
and this is what happened, and I'm not going to be mad at my body anymore. I'm going to accept that
Mm.
this is where it's at. This is genetics I have. This is the lifestyle I've led. This is where it's led me to. And one of my favorite
Mm.
sayings of all time is, whatever's for you doesn't miss you, and whatever misses you isn't for you, at least not right now. So if it's in front of me, it's mine. I drew it to myself somehow,
Mm.
and I just got to deal with that. And it's
Yeah.
I have to self-parent. I always say, it's time for adulting and self-parenting
Yeah.
and owning this stuff. And, I see a lot of people, they're pretty angry with their bodies a lot, especially when, we're gaining weight. In this society, it doesn't look good to be, heavy. It's, it's almost like it's shame. We're shamed for it. Like it's our fault. But really, once you know something to help yourself and you start implementing and you see the wins, it should be about having respect for yourself, I think, and getting to a healthy place, regardless of what that looks like. Being
Mm.
heavy is never going to be healthy for the body. It's not a natural state for it. The natural state
Mm.
is, in better balance, but you just got to start applying those principles, not being angry with it, and just work the basics. You work the basics. It never goes wrong. I haven't yet seen it go wrong,
Yeah.
ever.
Mm. Well, that interestingly, like that whole concept of yeah, I think a lot of people. I think I've said over years, like my body just hates
Mm,
me, my thyroid hates me, that kind of talk. And when I first released my book, it was called Kiss
mhm.
and Make Up with Your Thyroid, which I probably should have kept at that title, but I was trying to make everything streamlined and let's talk thyroid. And I'm not a marketing whiz by any stretch, but it's still it's exactly the same book, but I just changed the title. But that whole Kiss and Make Up with Your Thyroid idea was we do have to take this long term. We have to come to peace
Yes.
with the fact that we do have some issues going on in our body, but it's okay because we've got a long time to sort that out. And we don't have to do everything all at once. We can keep it simple. We can make it easy. There are these foundational things that we can do. And part of that is that getting out of that mindset that your body hates you and, it's destroying itself and all this sort of destructive language that we put on the way we talk about ourselves and our body, and making peace. Like it took me a long time to make peace with, I just need to be healthy. I don't need to lose
Mhm.
weight. I just need to be healthy. And then, tweaking that over time. Like at the moment, my weight has crept up a bit the last 2 months. And so I am kind of tweaking that to reduce it a bit. But in the end, it's still about being healthy. And so it's just that balancing act from, someone who's spent half her life on a diet. I have to be very careful that I'm managing that so it's not too diety, because I'm really convinced that we have to do things as a lifestyle. It has to be part of a long-term sustainable path, but there will be periods of time in that you do tweak it. And maybe it's when you're doing an elimination style program, or maybe you are just trying to rein in a few kilos, but it's still within that broader system of a lifestyle approach, not just oh, well, we're doing something for 30 days and then we just get back to how we were before.
No, I mean it's a physiological approach, though. I mean the lifestyle. So physiology across us humans, across a lot, all almost all animals actually, is pretty much the same. And so we can take
Mm.
that physiology and we can tweak that. And if you can eat to your physiology, that becomes your lifestyle. And learning to handle that is a mindset game. And I think the key to success for any of this stuff for longevity is dialing in the mindset. But you got to start somewhere. And I teach people with my program. I teach them a four-phase approach on how to approach their food and their relationship with food and their relationship with
Mm-hmm.
themselves and their metabolism. We try to reset the metabolism, even with Hashimoto's. You can do it. And it works every time. And it's
Mm.
about dialing in the typical metabolic issues, understanding what those are, eating to those. like eating to support those metabolic functions, resetting them so that you don't have to really overthink your food anymore. I mean, yes, you have your unique personalized diet because your immune system has maybe, had some issues with some of the proteins associated with maybe gluten, dairy proteins, egg proteins, whatever it is that you've got cross reactivities with. You've made your peace with that, and you say those are non-negotiables. Okay, they need to stay out when there's an autoimmune condition. But after that, you've got like huge options for a menu that you can start getting creative with, which is a mindset issue. And but once you've got your metabolism reset, you can pretty much live in that with a lot of ease. So there is yes, it's about coming to terms with whatever lifestyle approach you want to have, and you can, flirt with in and out of different types of things. But if you understand the physiology first, and then you support that in your body, your unique body. If we support that in your unique body, it becomes so freaking easy because you never have to overthink it anymore. And you're not going to the next diet. You're not going to the next, new thing that kind of comes up, because physiology is physiology is physiology. We have some base physiology that we can attend to with some pretty basic skill sets. And once you do that, everything's kind of normal. It works way better, even with a metabolic, issue like Hashimoto's really truly is, you know. But there's some fundamentals that work for everybody.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say, is that when you're talking about taking that, easy approach to managing Hashimoto's, is that sort of one of those core parts to that?
Absolutely.
The mindset?
Yeah. So EASY, I came up with that last year at my 50th birthday, and it came out of suffering and doing some tapping, and all of a sudden having this aha moment. Why? I said, why? I was laying on a beach, okay, in winter, and I was really irritated that I couldn't go paddling. I wanted to go kayaking, and I was just up at a cabin for a week by myself, just to zone into myself or zen into myself. And I was really irritable about turning 50. So I laid on this beach. I couldn't go paddling. And I laid on this beach on a bit of snow. And I was like, why can't my life be easy? Why can't dealing with Hashimoto's be easy? And I was really moody. There were some birds around me, and I couldn't even get into that. So I started tapping, which is based on acupuncture. You're doing all these tapping, all the really cool emotional freedom technique. And all of a sudden I thought, it can be easy. I can allow it to be easy. It's up to me to make it easy. And then I started thinking, I sat up and I was like, well, how could I make an acronym out of easy? And so I did. Yeah. And then I like rushed back to the cabin, and I think I wrote like 30 pages of ideas, and I was just like, oh my God, the universe just spoke to me at the lake, and that's where the easy way was born. And basically E is for everything to do with eating, but physiology. So that's where, we can do the basics, the fundamentals of, how your metabolism works. What is insulin resistance? How does digestion work? What are your allowances for, the different macros? How do you eat for your individual makeup? How do you figure that out without spending, money? You can learn in a group with it's low cost, but you figure it out, and then it's personalized. That's what E is all about. A is about any activity, mental, physical, and spiritual. You can't just have physical, and it has to be at different stages of changing your diet. What's a tolerable? How much inflammation you have, and what could be allowed, and learning how to have respect for where your body is at any moment. So mental, physical, and spiritual activities are needed. That's where you kind of dial in your why for getting well. That's where you figure out your relationship to yourself, and you get that more solid, and your relationship to your environment that you put your body in, right? Because it's up to you most of the time. And then S is, of course, sleep, rest. If you don't dial in sleep, it's pretty hard to recover from any autoimmune disease. I don't care which one you have, and or collections you have. If you have a collection of symptoms and you're not sleeping, it ain't going to get better just with food and a bit of movement. That will help, but it's better if you can dial in the sleep most of the time, and rest actually is underrated. You got to be respectful to your body for that. And there's like 7 types of rest, and we go over all that. Y is about saying yes yesterday. It's saying I am committed every single day even when I fall off, I'm going to pivot as fast as I can. And you just learn how to pivot, have grace for yourself, be at peace with the ups and downs, that the flares, the inevitable things that happen, but you stay in those flares for very short periods of time, not years or even weeks. It's very short time, because you've learned to respect yourself in such a way, and you've learned how to support the natural fundamental physiology of yourself that is basically species wide. You've learned how to do that with a lot of ease, with some guided practice, and all of a sudden you've got this pathway, I guess, to that you don't even have to complicate. You can actually just do it from there, and you can just flit in and out of these phases that I have, the 4 phases of the easy way, and live like that forever, I think. And it just becomes who you are. I love it. It's just so simplistic. And when I applied it to myself last June, because I was at my high point in weight for my height, and I was really down about it. And I know that's a lot of that's societal, but I didn't feel good either, and I was very uncomfortable. I couldn't, I didn't have the stamina. I just didn't feel good, and so I applied these ideas to myself. And sometimes I will say, as a practitioner, you know too much science, and you sort of get stuck in ways of thinking. I had to really expand what I thought was right and start kind of flirting with some ideas. And I started flirting with some cool ideas that I learned from other colleagues, and applying it to myself. And all of a sudden, weight just like it was just gone. It was like effortless, and I lost just about 50 pounds in 8 weeks. Well, 35 pounds, excuse me, 35 pounds in 8 weeks. But then within the next little bit, I've lost, about 50 pounds, and I've kept it off.
That's a
with,
lot. Yeah.
with Christmas, with Thanksgiving, with, with my holidays, I've kept it off. And all because I've reset my metabolism as much as I can with a thyroid condition, supported it with so many of the 4 pillars. And I flit in and out of these phases with almost effortless ease, because now it's just habit, and I've maintained the weight loss. I've almost reached my ultimate goal, but even if I don't care really, because I'm really happy here, and it's easy now to get fit. It's easy. I have more stamina. Uh, I I really respect myself now in a way that I never did. I really respect my physiology, and yeah, you can't help but want to share that with everybody, because it was so freaking easy. It was just so. People with Hashimoto's, you already know, if you're in this circle, like in your orbit, my orbit, you already know that you have to divorce yourself from certain foods, because the immune system has now, in its wisdom, it's not a mistake, in its wisdom, it has said, this is no longer good for you. It's too much like this, protein in your brain, or protein in your thyroid, protein in your nerves, or whatever. You have to say, no, it's a non-negotiable. You make your peace with that. But then there's this element of fear, like, well, what if I do this, or what if I do that? Why did I get a flare? Oh, you're like afraid of the world. You gotta learn to kind of live in the world and know where to put your body and how to handle flares when they come up. It's inevitable to divorce some foods, but that doesn't mean you can't have a wonderful relationship with styles of eating and all these different wonderful whole foods that are out there, and even some processed food, I guess, to a degree. But once you have that, I always tell people, food is fuel for performance first. It isn't fun. It isn't entertainment. That's not what it's here for. It is fuel for performance for your body. But after that, you do want to have a bit of a love affair with it, and you learn how to do that uh, over time. It's just a process. You've been through this, and everybody who's listening has. At first, you maybe don't want to eat 6 cups of vegetables a day. But after you start crunching on them and you start getting into that habit, your body will look forward to that. Your taste buds change, your palate shifts. You don't want the sugar like you used to. And you feel so good that why would you ever go back? You might flirt with it a bit and you slip and you're like, whoop. And then you pivot and you just kind of get back on as sooner than later. And then you learn how to prepare for, the big, a surgery, or if you have an injury, you know how to recover a little more quickly with that, because you know how your body handles certain diets and environments that you put yourself in. And you have tools like how to sleep better, or meditation practices, or certain exercises that your body thrives at when it's at this state versus when it's at this level. Once you know that, like, the peace that comes from that is staggering. I remember in the summer, I got to a point where I'd hit that 35-pound mark, and I thought, oh my God, I never have to worry about gaining weight again, ever, for the rest of my life. I know that
Wow,
I can.
that's freedom.
Oh my! I didn't think I could ever get there. I thought, oh, I was going to be struggling with this for the rest of my life, and I'd have to be like piecemealing and being really particular and precise. But I was at a point where, here I am shopping in my closet with my old clothes that now can fit me, and I was thinking, I have zero fear, literally zero fear of becoming or getting to that high weight again, pending, I end up in a hospital or something, and then the hospital feeds me crap. But I will never be that unhealthy again. And that confidence, that peace of mind, that comfort from that, there's no stress around my food choices anymore. I did not think that was going to go away. So that was a side effect of the program that was truly a gift. And, I want that for everybody. And
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't you love that? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
yep.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that that food freedom, like, and I think for a lot of people, that are listening, s- I mean, certainly it's been my experience. I've said before, like I spent half my life on a diet, and I think when you've had Hashimoto's for a long period of time, or maybe you haven't known you've had it,
Yeah.
but you've had it for a long time. Weight is an
Mm.
issue. It is a struggle, and that I often say, like you said before, when you cut out those foods that just don't work for you, or don't really work for anyone with an autoimmune
That's
condition,
true.
and you come to terms with that, and I talk about that in my
Hmm.
book, that it is a grieving process. Like, that is a grieving process, and we've talked about that on other episodes too. And that can take time. And I mean, for me, really, that probably took a few years, um, about 10 years ago, to come to terms with some of that. And so I have to remember now that it's not easy. Like, it's easy now, but it wasn't easy then.
But
And
I
it did
think it
take
can
some
be. I
time.
think it can be if you're in a group, because everybody's doing the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a very structured and
Mm-hmm.
very time-oriented thing. So it's not a,
Mm.
I just read, this blog. It said I had to give up gluten forever with Hashimoto's. Oh my God, what am I going to
Mm-hmm.
eat? That's usually what people say to me. "Now, what am I going to eat?" I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, you don't only
Yeah.
eat bread. Like, there's things
Yeah.
without gluten that you can eat.
There's a lot. Yeah. There's, yeah.
But
Yeah.
they initially, it's that fear response, and like, oh my God, and that's a forever thing. So
Mm.
we teach them, like, it's a 3-month thing. Flirt with that. Be structured. Do it. You'll feel so good that it becomes like,
Yeah.
oh, it's easy kind of to go gluten free. I mean, gluten free is easy today.
Yeah.
Seeing if you
It
have,
is now.
well, it is,
Yeah.
and it was anyways. If you wanted to do a whole foods diet, you could still do it. You just wouldn't eat the glutinous
Mm.
grains, but people want process, they want convenience. And I think that's maybe more where the grieving comes in, is that they're giving up convenience. They have to think now before
Mm.
they, order off a menu,
That's a good point.
and they can't just go with what they feel like having, because it's an emotional
Mm.
eating response instead of a eating for performance response, and an eating for respect of self, where you're at response. And I think, if you're doing that with a group, and you're all doing it together, and
Mm.
it's a timed thing, it gives you you've chosen to make that a challenge for yourself, and it's not necessarily a forever thing. If you don't get many wins out of it, well, I guess you're not going to do it. But if you get a lot of wins out of it, it's really motivating, really motivating. And then, because we personalize it, eventually you learn how to personalize it. Then you realize that if you want to be sick, you just go down that road, and you start eating
Yeah,
these things
that's
all
right.
the
Yeah.
time. Yeah, you choose it, and it's an adult
Yeah.
thing. You choose it,
Yeah.
and you can't blame anybody else but yourself. and you own that. And I think the grieving process can be shortened. I think it's really difficult when you're on your own. You feel very different than your husband or your wife or your kids, or that your friend that you went to the cafe with, or they want to go out on a binge night and have fries and pop or drink or whatever, and you can't do that with the same brainlessness, I guess, mindlessness as before, which got you in trouble, which is a big contributor. But after a while, if you start living at a higher level of function, the things you have to give up, you get greater gains than whatever you're grieving to give up, and it becomes just easier. But it's easier if you're around people who are going through it, like in your group. It's easier when you have people with
That's
like-minded
true.
ideas. It's just, you just know you have somebody to go and complain to, or say, what would you do in this situation? You can get some support with that. Or if you're all doing the same kind of program around the same time, that it's a timed thing, and there's other people you can ask questions of, and you don't feel so alone out in there. And I think it makes the grieving process a little less severe.
I think you're right. You're probably right. And look, probably in my experience was I would have done it on my own, really. But yeah, and I think it's the same. Like when I run my Kickstart program, it's the same thing. So, and what I love seeing, and it happens every time, and it will happen in your program all the time too, is that really only takes a few
Yep.
days for people to start to feel better.
Yep.
And you think, oh my gosh, like this is only 3 days. Like one of my friends did my Kickstart program. Oh, it was in the middle of lockdown actually. And she's like, oh my gosh, I have woken up and gone to bed with tummy pain for years. I'm sure it was 3 days, it was gone.
I know. It seems
Gone.
like a miracle,
And
right?
yeah,
And it's just the
yeah, it does.
foundations.
Yeah.
It's just the basics. And if they understand why it
Yeah.
works, I think that helps too. I like educating my
Mm.
people. I don't try to go too deep into it. Maybe I'll have levels of it in my Easy University at some point, but uh, if they understand why things are working the way they do, if they understand the physiology, if they understand how the immune system starts looking at proteins and parts of proteins a little differently, and how exposures happen, and why how the immune system builds up a memory for these things. So that's why it has to be non-negotiable long term. If they start understanding that, and they've experienced it on the other side when they start to feel better, it's very, very rare will they be in that negative place for very long. They know exactly how to get back to the other side and to reduce the symptoms. There is a tipping point, I think, though, where if you keep pushing the envelope, you just don't recover like you used to. So the longer you can support yourself with healthy choices, the better your life is going to be, and the longer your health span, and the less other autoimmune disease you're going to get, because it's a little more complicated than people who don't have a confirmed autoimmune disease. It's a little more serious for us with autoimmune. But like you said earlier, with Hashimoto's, we do have a little bit of time. With Graves' disease, I would argue that it's a little more severe, a little more aggressive, and emergency type thing. The program still works for them, but they do need extra finessing, extra care. Hashimoto's, we do have a little bit of wiggle room, but the sooner you get on board, and I think structure with people, we're like a bunch of kids. We, in a nice way, like we're like, I'm like that. Like I do better if I have structure for a period of time. Well, maybe all the time. If I have
Oh, me
structure,
too.
yeah. So
Yeah.
if you have structure,
Yeah.
and it's
It's
built into a
easier.
program, it
It's
is.
so much
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah.
That's why I say it's easier to be 100% gluten-free
Yes.
than mostly gluten-free.
Well, it's no good
Because
to
the
be
mostly
mostly gluten free.
gluten-free,
It's no good to be mostly gluten free with Hashis.
no, it's like, you're really not gluten-free at all. But I hear a lot of people say, oh yeah, I'm mostly, well, you're not gluten-free.
No.
And it's actually easier because you don't have to debate every
No.
time.
It's
Oh,
not.
am I
It's
going to
not.
have
That's
this?
right. You're not going, oh,
How
what
long
do I
to
feel
go?
like today?
It's just a
Yep.
non-negotiable. It's
Non-negotiable.
so much easier.
But you,
It's a
you have to
freedom.
be gluten free, and the research is super clear. The immune system has a memory, and gluten is a big molecule, so it's made up of a lot of parts, and you can have a memory against any of those little bits of amino acid strings. You The immune system has a memory; it doesn't forget. And so if you bring gluten back in, you could have I mean, I remember a paper, I think they were talking about a celiac patient, and they had celiacs with totally gluten free, and celiacs with one time of gluten exposure, and then they measured the antibody levels for 6 months. They still had elevated antibody levels against gluten 6 months later.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so it still affects you. And then, with the Hashimoto's, you can get the cross reactivity with the cerebellum of the brain, very common. And, it spreads. And so you have to be gluten free. I don't know, if
Mm.
everybody needs to be dairy free, but we're not cows. We're not baby cows. We shouldn't be eating dairy anyways. Maybe for some people it can be an occasional, but if you've got sensitivities to it, again, it's an immune thing. It's not just a I can't digest it thing, which is an intolerance.
Yeah.
It's an immune thing. It's a memory, and you have to find your non-negotiables. But yeah, in a structured environment, you can personalize that. You can figure that out with very low cost. So really, it's
Mm.
available for just about everybody. Instead of doing the big expensive
Yeah.
tests to find out if you have immune sensitivities to whatever type of protein, which is based on basically what you're eating right now. I don't really love doing those tests for the most part. I think they're a waste of money when really you could just
Mm.
do a very curated, personalized elimination type diet and then learn what you can and can't tolerate at this stage of your life. So, yeah, I think structure is very, very helpful.
Yeah. And I think that's probably a good place to start to wrap up our conversation, because I know we could keep talking for a long time. But it is, yeah, having a few, like, I like to talk about positive and practical too. It's that practical, like, have some structure, have some
Yep.
non-negotiables. Are there is there anything I haven't asked you that you think the audience would need to know, or a couple of kind of key takeaways that you'd like to leave people with,
Mm.
Krista?
Well, I guess key takeaways would be, if you've got Hashimoto's diagnosis, it's not a terrible thing. I think that can be a
Mm.
gift that has maybe been in disguise for a while. And I look at it
Mm.
as an opportunity. And I think it could be worse than Hashimoto's. And I think,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And I think that, we do have that bit of wiggle room. We're kind of fortunate that way. And we also have a huge community. It's the most common autoimmune disease on the planet. Why is
Yeah.
that? Few people are asking, why is that? We're obviously very, genetically susceptible to the environment that is changing. And part of that environment is the food that you eat. You as in the collective people of the group here that has autoimmunity, you have an opportunity to make peace with your environment. And so I tell people all the time, especially my gals, you got to take the body you have right now. I don't care what age you are, what state you're in, of health. You take the body you have right now that has been the culmination of how many years of decline and mistakes and sometimes conscious, sometimes not conscious. And you say the environment it's in is not working for the body you have. Otherwise, you wouldn't have so many symptoms. So, how do you influence the environment to support the body you have to start it to thrive? And that means you have to make some really good adulting, parenting choices. And you have non negotiables, you have things that you can have sometimes, and you have things that are maybe weekly, and then you have things that whole foods that can be daily that are specific and personalized for your lifestyle. Then your life like opens up. The potential is phenomenal. I didn't even know until I did it myself. And I wish I'd done this many, many, many years ago, but whatever's for you doesn't miss you. And but I guess I want to leave them with hope that if they've still been struggling and they've been trying to go gluten free or they're trying to do all these things, there is easier ways to do that. And one of the ways is through your KISS program. It's through the Easy Way with Dr. K program. You find your practitioners that you resonate with, and you find that community, and you do it. You rock it until you figure it out, and then all of a sudden your life just opens up, and you have the best life ever. You don't have to worry so much anymore. You don't have to
Mm.
have fear popping up every second, or you're afraid to get your teeth cleaned because you're afraid they're going to use fluoride or something. It's going to like throw you off. Instead, you're like, I know how to prepare for that, so it's not such a big struggle, right? And that kind of stuff. And I tell you, it's possible. You just got to
Yeah.
find your people.
Yeah. Yeah. You definitely don't have to do it alone. And I
Don't
hear
do it
that from
alone.
people, don't do it alone, and you don't have to do it
Mm.
alone. And even if you feel alone, you're not alone. And even just listening to this podcast, I get people that message me and say, not thought I was the only one, but I felt really alone or
Isolated.
isolated. And now I feel like that there's, yeah, a hope. And I love that you finished with that, because I often I like to finish a podcast. It's often what people say, there is hope, because there is, but that is that community. There is a
Can I
community of
add that,
people.
with Hashimoto's, there is a subset of us that they're very thin. It's not a super common thing. I mean, a lot of us, when we haven't
Yeah.
really dialed in everything and mastered, how to master our physiology within the autoimmunity, we have weight on. But there is a subset that are very thin. You can still dial in your eating regime to support the physiology that you have, which is a little bit different than somebody who's got Hashimoto's and struggles with weight. The same things apply, and they still need a community too. And I think sometimes that's overlooked. That you've got, I mean, Isabella Wentz is a prime example. I mean, she's the mother of autoimmunity or Hashimoto's in my books,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
she's always
yeah,
been thin. She's never had
yeah.
a weight issue. Like, I think she gained like 5 pounds one time or something. Like, ooh, like I don't think she doesn't have that
Yeah, but
same
you're right.
extreme
I know
issue.
quite a few like that too.
Right.
Yeah,
And so,
yeah,
but the same
yeah.
fundamentals still apply. You can still, their metabolism is still not working right. They just don't store fat like some of us. And so you can still use the same kind of tools that you and I teach in a community environment to still help them thrive. And I don't want them feeling
Yeah.
shamed that, I've had people come in to me and they say they feel bad that, they've got Hashimoto's, but they're thin. Don't feel bad.
Oh,
I've heard that.
gosh.
Yeah. And they just feel like, oh, why am I
Yeah.
complaining? Because I'm not
Oh,
heavy.
oh,
Yeah. And no, join
oh.
the groups, participate, thrive. Like the same kind of, we all have the same basic physiology. You can personalize it. There's always hope. Always, always, always.
Oh, and look,
And everything is
and
figure
there's
outable.
always help.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And look, there are so many non-weight related symptoms that
Yes.
we can have with Hashimoto's. So,
Well, thyroid
I
affects
mean, and
everything, thyroid
if
hormone.
you're listening at, yeah, and if you're on the thinner side, you're probably battling with other
Oh, for sure.
aspects, which all,
They sure are.
like the, yeah, just so you can totally benefit too. Yeah. Thank you for adding that in, because I think that we have talked quite a bit about weight and food, and I think that's a good reminder at the end. Now, Krista, if people did want to join your program or work with you, I'll make sure all the links
Cool.
are in the show notes. But where should people? Where's it best for people to connect with you?
So right now I have a cool Facebook page called Hey Hashi, HEYHASHI. So they can join there, and I have a little group there, Hey Hashi Healing Inspiration. And then I do have a website, theeasyway.ca, and that's where they can find about the Easy Way with Dr. K program. And that's the 3-month program that they get entry into a private Facebook group, and they get daily coaching from me. Lots of cool stuff. In fact, I'd love to have you on there and do an interview, because I think that your approach would be very top of mind and shows alignment. And they would love to hear from
Yeah,
you.
I'd love to.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
awesome. And yeah, they can find me on Facebook, acupluswellness.com. So they can find me. I'd like to give them a freebie, if I may, just to sort of, yeah.
Yeah, oh gosh.
If you remember, we talked
Please.
about.
I've got to say, you are a very generous podcast
Oh,
guest.
good.
I've got to say, in so many ways. Yeah, you are. You've been beautiful.
I think you
So,
got to give.
yeah,
We
yeah.
people need
So
help.
give, please give.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So, like in the Easy Way, so EASY, S is the pillar, right? The third pillar that's all about sleep and rest. If you don't dial in sleep and you don't work on that all the time, it's very hard to heal with Hashimoto's or anything, but very hard with Hashimoto's. We need to have tolerance for life. So you need to dial in your sleep. So I'm going to give them an easy little mini course that I have that'll give them really cool ideas about how to better dial that in. And it's at theeasyway.ca/sleep. And if they use the coupon code EASY, EASY 100, they'll get it for free, just for your listeners. So theeasyway.ca/sleep, using the coupon code EASY 100. And I hope that helps them. It's just to kind of remind them of all the things that maybe they do well, and what they could maybe start focusing on and picking away at and dialing in. Because if sleep is good, you're well on your way to success in managing Hashimoto's with ease, which is
Yeah,
what
thank
I
you.
live for.
That's lovely. And and make sure if you didn't kind of catch that, if you're listening to this while you're out walking the dog or something, then I will make sure, the link for that is in all the notes. So just go looking for that. But that's a very generous gift to our listeners. So thank
Oh,
you, Krista.
absolutely.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your experience, your knowledge. I've loved this conversation. I loved our conversation last week. I think, it's really beautiful to be connected across the globe with you, and hopefully we can do some more
I
things
hope
together
so.
in the
Yeah. I
future.
mean, anytime you want to talk about something even specific medically for your community, if you ever need that, I'm here. Any way I can help,
Oh,
because
thank you.
knowledge is power if you
Thank
apply
you.
it. But if you don't have the knowledge, you don't know what to apply. So I'm here.
Yeah.
I think my role is as a teacher. I'm a guide on the side. So yeah, I would love to be
Yeah.
talking with you again soon.
All right, this is the KISS thyroid coaching segment. KISS is keep it super simple. So you've heard us talking about keeping it super simple and the easy way in this conversation. The easy way is Dr. Coombs' program. KISS is the principle behind my book and my Kickstart program, and a new program that I've got in the wings, I think for the middle of the year, so stay tuned for that. So my question for you is have you really got the basics integrated into your life so that they're part of your lifestyle? Because as Dr. Coombs was just saying, there's not much point spending lots of money getting fancy tests or seeing expensive practitioners if they're going to tell you to eat clean water, clean up your diet, manage your stress first. So that's really my question is, there's never health perfection, but have you really integrated those basic fundamentals into your lifestyle? And if you have, fabulous. If you've still got any kind of lurking symptoms or things, then now is be the perfect opportunity to make that appointment to go see that functional medicine practitioner to kind of, as she said, to finesse around the edges. If you haven't, then I've got a couple of suggestions for you. One, if you don't have a copy of my book already, called Let's Talk Thyroid, Positive and Practical Thyroid Help, please get your hands on a copy. You can get it on Kindle or in paperback via Amazon. If you're in Australia, get it from letstalkthyroid.com. That's good for me if you can buy it direct, because that's really the whole point of my book, is to be that low-hanging fruit, to provide information and lots of practical examples of how to integrate these basics into your life. That's the book. Sorry, there's lots of birds chirping outside at the moment. So that would be number one, if you haven't got these basics now. Number two would be obviously check out Dr. Coombs' The Easy Way program. And if that appeals to you and you'd like to work with her, dive right on into that, because, I think one of the things I like about Dr. Coombs is that we've got synergy in the way we approach managing thyroid health. So we're going to have our own idiosyncrasies, obviously, and individualities, but dive right into that. She's a wealth of knowledge and experience. And number three is, if you're looking for just maybe nailing the diet component in particular alongside mindset, then I'd encourage you to have a look at my Kickstart program, which again you can find on letstalkthyroid.com. It's delivered to you in daily emails over a 30-day period to help you really integrate a thyroid-friendly eating plan and wrap your head around some of the mindset issues around not only diet, but just the way you think about yourself and your body and your thyroid health. So some of the things that we've covered on this program. You can start it whenever you like, is ready to go. It actually is really set up that whenever you sign up, you'll start next Monday. So if you're ready, dive on in and do the Kickstart program. Alrighty, that is it for the KISS Thyroid coaching. Keep it super simple. If you haven't nailed the basics, do that first. And if you have, and you've got still a few things that need some work, then you're perfectly primed to go get the best value out of your functional medicine practitioner. Alrighty, see you everyone in 2 weeks' time with the next episode of Let's Talk Thyroid. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Thyroid. If you have enjoyed the content, or perhaps you're thinking, oh, my mum needs to hear this, or my sister or my bestie, I would love it if you would share this episode with them. That really just helps spread the positive and practical message of Let's Talk Thyroid and helps that broader thyroid community, our friends and family, to live well with their thyroid health. So you can just, share the episode. If you subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast, it's free. It's really helpful because then you'll be notified every time a new podcast comes out, and it just makes it much easier to find. There's usually a little subscribe button or a bell, or follow often is the terminology. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be helpful. Of course, if you want to leave a review, even better, just a sentence or two about how the podcast has helped you. You can definitely connect with me via letstalkthyroid.com. That's where you'll find access to my book, my coaching, my freebies, and really everything that I offer in terms of thyroid support.